Thanks very much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you a little bit about food and space and cellular agriculture industry and what its role can have, and really just talk about overall what both the opportunity is, but also how this is a really important topic for discussion. And it's really fantastic that both the Canadian Space Agency and NASA have come together for this Deep Space Food Challenge. Thanks for bringing and talking about that. This is a good example of how you're bringing an international community together to solve a really big, really huge problems that are uh, plaguing this world at the moment. And food is something that is really exciting. It's something that when we go travel, it's something that we really look forward to trying new foods and sitting together with friends and family. It really does bring us together, and it's a really important topic. And food and space is also both exciting and fun. It's an exciting part of astronauts' days, when the food is good. Um, but it's a very important component to our psychology. It's an important part of how our moods are even derived, how our energy is to be able to work through the day. Astronauts have a very difficult time, and food, in fact, it's a very difficult thing from a perspective of logistics. A four-person crew going to Mars, it's going to take 24,000 pounds of food and packaging just for four individuals over that 3-year period. That's a huge amount of logistics and material and waste afterwards to deal with, to think about. And the scaling and the size of what we're trying to achieve, from how many people and how much food we can produce and how much waste we can deal with. These are really important things to think about. And right now, the entire industry in the cellular agriculture space is, we're still just at the cusp of discovering and developing new cell lines and new growth media and new ways of producing and manufacturing these products. We haven't even gotten into the stage where we can start producing this at large scales. And this is super relevant when we're thinking about space. If we're thinking about even 100-person crew, that same 24,000 pounds that four people took in 3 years, that's only 44 days if we're talking about a lunar mission. So a little over a month of time, and 24,000 pounds of food and packaging is going to be required. And if you want to send that same 100 people to Mars over 3 years, 600,000 pounds of food and packaging. These are unmanageable amounts from a logistical standpoint to send. Aside from the fact that, hey, the nutrient degradation over that 3-year time frame is a very serious and real concern, to sustain everyone in life support systems. Back here on Earth, we've also got food challenges of our own. We're growing to 9 to 10 billion people in the next 30 years. 29 years actually. And this is going to require a massive increase in the amount of food that we need to produce. A 70% increase in the amount of food producing if we're going to consume the proteins and foods in the same way that we are today, because of the inefficiency of animals and the way that they convert food into body mass. This is what is a massive driver into how much extra food. That, on top of the food waste, where we waste about 30% of all the food that we produce. Agriculture takes a significant amount of land, and this is really where, as a society, as a global society, where we're really feeling some of these constraints. And we have less than a quarter left of natural lands, and we've used significant sums of arable land and land with fresh water and good soils and stable and steady climates. We've used this to set up our agriculture system that we've got today, but we don't have any more. We're running out of this. That, on top of the fact that we've had the number of people that are starving are increasing since 2014. This is a staggering situation that we're in, especially considering that SDG goal number 2 in the Sustainable Development Goals set out to end world hunger by 2030. We're close to 1 billion people now, and last year with COVID, we think that there's potentially another 90 million people that are now fall into this food insecure category. And the situation is not getting better at the moment. So we're going through very serious and struggling times. So the important part that I'm really trying to nail home here is that we need to change the system. We need to completely relook at both terrestrially here on Earth, but also how we're going to develop these systems in space. Our current system, and this is not just in the food system, this is in our mining and agriculture, this is in our manufacturing industries. It's a very linear system where we take a resource, we use that resource to manufacture something, we'll use it, and then we put it in the garbage can. What is this thing, the garbage can, this waste? There's no such thing as a garbage dump. Is just a hole that we've hopefully put a membrane around, or we dump it into the ocean and it just goes off somewhere. This is what we see as results from that mentality and approach. That's not something that we can take to space. What we need to think of, and what space forces us to think about, are closed systems. And we need to apply that same thinking here on Earth, where we take and materials and we utilize those materials and we make and manufacture products. We use them, reuse them, and we recycle those into large food production systems that are closed loop. And space forces us to think about those same type of constraints. We've done this in large agriculture systems around the world already. Greenhouses are a great example of recycling nutrients and water and heat energy within these systems. They can certainly get significantly better, but we've already made massive progress here. Now, this technology isn't equally proliferated around the world for a number of different reasons, but these are tackleable challenges. And in the protein space, cellular agriculture really opens up that possibility. NASA's sort of figured this out very well, and we're recycling about 90% of the water on board space station. And it takes a significant number of systems and integrated systems to make that happen. And it's really important to think about the entire interconnected system to make this thing function. If you had a piece of plastic packaging that was off-gassing some chemical that then got into the air filtration system, and then the humidity collector concentrated that, put it into the water stream, and now you're drinking those chemicals. So when you're thinking about materials in space, you can't think about your own one little widget or your one little component. You have to think about the entire ecosystem that you're living within. And that's really important when there's a significant amount of packaging in the food that we currently use and send up to the International Space Station, and what we are planning currently to be doing for Mars and the Moon. And so we need to think about much more holistic systems and continue looking back at our Earth. This is also a closed support system. When you look around, this is just space. There's nothingness and vacuum around us. And we need to apply, again, that same thinking back to Earth. And when we think about the food system back on Earth, we're growing, and we have been growing pretty consistently around 2% of our annual production per year, to keep up with population growth. And what we see going forward in the next 10 years is we're going to continue to see growth in both meats and fish and dairy consumption. Similarly, around 1.5 to 2% range in growth, is assuming a similar level. And our per capita demand remains the same, which we see that as maintaining the same. But one thing that's really important to think about, and for all the potential entrepreneurs and the existing entrepreneurs that are here, or investors that are listening, is how food is priced. And the cellular agriculture industry, as we're launching new products, it makes a significant amount of sense. We're only able to manufacture a small amount of stuff, so we're going to focus on high value products that we can displace and get a decent amount of money. But the really impoverished people, and when I mean low income, and when this report means low income, we're talking about less than $2,000 US dollars a year. These are incredibly low income individuals, and they're spending half of their entire income just on food. the reality of shifting diets is that these lower middle and these upper middle income class individuals are starting to move into the higher income classes and are going to start shifting and changing their diets. But even the people that are in the lower income, we really need to start thinking about how we can provide a better nutrition and better food production systems for people back here on Earth. Because that growth and scale that we talked about earlier, we can't transport the agriculture system that we've developed in North America and Europe into developing countries. This is what has led to detrimental ecosystem collapses. And so cellular agriculture represents, I believe, one of the best opportunities to leapfrog the agriculture system that we have commercialized here in these areas, and really begin to address products that can tackle this massive market, and individuals that don't have enough capital. Back to space, another really important to think about component here is the astronaut's time. How much energy and effort and time that goes into even just preparing food. An astronaut is measured down to the minute in terms of everything that they're doing, from sleep time to wake time. These are all really important components to consider. They've only got a half an hour to prep their entire meal, not just the one component of it. Their entire meal, they've only got this. So preparation time is really important, and cellular agriculture really has that capability to be able to start producing food, and significant amounts of food, with a lot of automation that could be built into this. And I think that's a really important thing to think about when we're considering the types of food production systems that we're going to use, the infrastructure and systems that we're going to deploy in any sort of lunar base or Mars base into the future. The systems need to be flexible to be able to produce cellular products, to use microbial agriculture systems and bioreactors, extruders, processing of food products. These assets that can have multi-purpose use beyond just making and manufacturing one individual product. These are really important things to think about, because taste and the nutrition component, which is really difficult to achieve, both in the cellular agriculture sector where we're at right now. We've made fantastic strides, and a large number of the companies, both speaking here and others that are commercializing today their technologies. The strides that we've made and moved in the cellular taste, texture, mouthfeel, we're very close to getting to parity. I mean, we're not hours away, but we're within a few years of getting to this parity point. And I think this is going to really make a big tipping point, both globally here, in our food systems, but also in space. And I think the timelines really align very well with the cellular agriculture industry to really leverage the space domain to be able to demonstrate and showcase and provide that high quality experience that otherwise would be impossible to deliver. We're not bringing cows and chickens and pigs with us to any lunar base. It's very difficult. The variety of the different types of foods, though, and the different selection. Now, this is obviously just sushi in front of us, but you don't go to a sushi restaurant and just order some salmon and a little bit of rice. You're going to order a platter and a plate of different types of foods, and this is the way that we've, as a society, have grown up and have started consuming foods. And this is also the experience that we need to replicate. And cellular agriculture really lets us do that. Orbital Farm and my company, what we're doing, we're trying to be an integrator to this. We're trying to develop systems so that we can integrate cellular agriculture systems into the wider ecosystem of all the other components that need these to be successful, both here on Earth, so that we can pilot and test these components to operate for long-term periods, to operate at long-term periods at scales that are relevant to the desires and the visions of some of the space companies. When when we have billionaires stating we're going to have millions of people living and working in space, this is obviously an aspirational goal that we're trying to achieve, but we need to work on the scale problem, and we need to understand how these systems integrate within a larger ecosystem, what waste streams they're producing, how can we utilize those waste streams, can we access waste streams and use those waste streams to provide the nutrients, to provide the cell growth media. And it's that wider ecosystem view that we're taking in our approach. We're sort of an integrator, or a hub to connect all the different components. Is the position that we're taking, because it's complex. This is an example of a controlled environment and closed ecosystem that was developed. And in this situation, they had two goats that were part of it, but incredibly complex to be able to support just two crew. And it's the understanding of each of these, the intersections of all these different technologies. It's how they integrate together, and it's how these systems can operate, so that when we decide to go to Mars, that we're able to have confidence in the systems that we're utilizing, and we're able to look at the waste streams, the carbon dioxide that's being produced from about a kilogram of CO2 for each astronaut per day. The wastewater streams that we're using, how can those be applied? The energy systems to power this, how are those integrated together with bioreactor systems, extruder systems, water treatment systems, plant growth systems? Because we're not getting all of our nutrients out of cellular agriculture. We're going to have all of these different systems and integrated together. And so we're trying to play this role of bringing everybody and bringing all the technologies together here, because let's face it, if you're going to be an astronaut, you don't want 70% of your workday being spent to start producing food and being a space farmer. Maybe there'll be a few space farmers that's their dedicated job, but we need technologies, and we need to understand how these systems become integrated, so that and I believe that cellular agriculture is the best opportunity to provide that resource and food system specifically for astronauts. And one thing I wanted to talk about, beyond ourselves, this entire industry and sector, what it really needs is a significant step up in investment. There are some great companies that have gotten some awesome VC funding, but this entire sector needs about an order of magnitude greater investment. Our food system feeds billions of people, and like I said from the beginning, those billions of people, we cannot continue on the same pathway that we're on, and our ecosystem will define that very clearly, and we're going to see those increasing starving people in short order if we don't make massive change. And investment is a critical thing for this entire sector that needs growth. And this is the moment. If there are investors on this call now listening, this is the time to take a look, and don't choose one, because there isn't just going to be one winner. There's not one food production company around the world. We have thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of farmers. Our food system is massively complex and integrated, but this entire sector needs to grow. And so I really want to make sure that resonates, and it's more encouraged. Beyond the space application is incredibly important, and I believe it's a pinnacle component to tying us all together and providing a really fantastic connection point that brings people terrestrially here on Earth together, but it also brings people in space together. Space is a component that is deeply rooted in our humanity. We've looked up at the stars and the galaxies and shooting stars and astrological events that have completely wowed us as a human species. The awe and wonder that comes from an understanding of the perspective of where we fit into this overall universe is astounding. And it takes us back hundreds of thousands of years to when humanity began. And we all look up around the world at the same moon, and these become these components, this unifying element. And through space and through its focus on closed systems, its focus on sustainability, it forces us to think about our food system in a very different way, and it really truly is something that can bring us together. And the time in the world right now is absolutely the moment when more connected things and more ways of bringing a global ecosystem and countries together around food is more important than ever. And so I want to thank you very much for your time, and thanks very much for having me here. Yeah, I look forward to answering any questions and talking a little further.
Thank you, Scott. And I do love the visuals that you had in there. It kind of sets the scene, definitely in a nice futuristic way. We have some questions that are coming in the Q&A, and we'll tackle those now. The first question I wanted to ask you was regarding that statement. We've heard a couple times throughout the talks here, but having 1 million people on Mars, or kind of living in space in the next or by 2050, or the next, like you said, 29 years. Do you think that this is a possibility?
Do 1 million people? No, I don't think that that's possible. Do I think 100 people? I think we could do that. Like I said, the when you start breaking down the math of logistics, so if Starship is successful, we're looking at around 150 tons that it's going to be able to transport to the Martian surface. If you're looking at that food requirement and packaging, I think that's for I think it's around 180 Starships that's going to need to be brought for so for 1,000 people. It's astronomical. So 100. No, let me correct that. So 100 individuals is 2 Starships worth of transport materials to get there. So to do significant amounts more is just it's too much. And so we need to be able to build systems that can confidently operate for long periods of time. So if you're going to go to Mars and you're not going to bring your lunch and all of your meals with you, if you're going to make that decision, like, okay, you know what, I don't need it, I'm going to rely on the food production, the farm that's there on Mars, and I'm going to go. That means you've got to have enough confidence that that's going to operate for 3 years. That's not going to break down. It's not going to require parts that you don't have backup parts for. And it's going to continue that operation for that period of time that you're going to be there, because you can't make it back to Earth otherwise. And so it's not just you, it's you and the 100 or 200 other people that are with you that also are making that same bet. And so you've got to have, in order to develop a system that can operate securely for 3 years, and if you miss that launch window for whatever reason, because the solar panels went out and you couldn't produce enough fuel to launch and get you home, if you've got to now go through 2 cycles, you probably want that system to operate for 6 years. So for you to design a system that can operate for 6 years without maintenance, without significant parts, that the entire ecosystem of the life support system is going to operate, that's going to take you 15 to 20 years just to develop the confidence in that system to not bring that quantity of food. And so we need to get going yesterday. Last year, 10 years ago, NASA was working on these solutions in 1968. They published papers on life support systems for missions longer than a year. They did a lot of work back in the 1960s, but it didn't get funded. NASA stopped funding food programs at certain points. Money was shifted to other more important areas. A lot of solutions were solved, but we didn't have a need to go for year-long missions. So we need to spend the time and we need to operate systems at large enough scales for long periods of time integrated together. That's really what we need to do, and we need to do it in many different places. And so that's in order to execute on that vision of hundreds or thousands of people living in space, that's what it's going to take. And Earth is the perfect place to do that testing, because we got a lot of hungry people to feed.
And we do call them moonshots for a reason. So shoot for 1 million and we'll see where we get.
Yeah.
We have a question from someone who asks, what are the key steps needed for a true closed loop ag system? This is a little bit of a broad question, so they kind of dig a little bit deeper and say, is there a key technology that is needed in any closed loop system?
Is there a key technology? I mean, every system's important. So it's hard to define a key technology. There are sort of platform technologies that sort of are important across each system. So sensors, is a good example, and the data and repository system and the control systems that monitor and manage that. When you've got different systems and you've got a bioreactor that's going to operate and it needs, the feedstock to be supplied at a certain rate, and that feedstock requires water flow and CO2 sources flowing at a proper rate. And if the CO2 source stops, that stops your one downstream process, and then the next 6-7 downstream processes from that need to be prepared to not have material flowing in. So in large circular systems, sensors and databases and data systems that operate and manage those systems, those are really critical and important. But every underlying component it's also important. So water systems, water is present in pretty much every single process that we have. You need it for cleaning, you need it for actually using it in producing food products. So water and water treatment systems are critically important. Almost every single process has a waste stream that's associated with it. So how you're dealing with those waste streams. So the waste management side of systems are really critical and important. So it's difficult to say which ones stand out, but maybe that gives some flavor.
Great. And this is kind of a nice segue to the next question, which talks about waste systems. And so Nicholas says, thank you for the presentation. As for fermentation technologies, do you see them as more of a good way to recycle waste from other non-fermented sources like plants, or as a way to generate high value products?
So I see fermentation technologies as, really a fantastic tool to utilize within controlled environment systems. I think, here on Earth as well. You can do fermentation with sugars, you can do fermentation with organisms that are called methanotrophs or hydrogenotrophs that can utilize waste stream sources and carbon dioxide sources to start producing proteins and polymers and oils and fertilizer products. So I see them, in an integrated larger scale system as being sort of a waste to value component. I see them as providing nutrients to cellular agriculture systems. I see that as an enabling component to start producing some of the key components that we're going to need to be able to manufacture. How are you going to produce cell growth media? It doesn't get created out of nothing, and you're not going to be able to transport and ship that entire amount. So we need to develop manufacturing methods that are part of that. So I think fermentation systems are critical to the success of a long-term life support system. There are other solutions. You can use algae, you can use yeast systems, which are it is fermentation, but yeah, that's hopefully that answers it.
We have another question from Aditya, who asks, what do you think of the possibility of fully microbial systems rather than hydroponics or aquaponics? Microbial systems have vastly greater efficiency and much lower risk of crop failure due to the fast cycle time. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in that entire idea. I think we're a little while from that, and I think that we're a little while from that from a psychological perspective. I think it's going to be a while. I guess maybe let me rephrase that. I haven't seen any companies or research that has pointed to a way where we could just grow the rice seed, for example, and not have to deal with the entire biomass of the rice plant. If there's someone out there that has that, please get in touch with me. I would love to have a conversation. I think that's where we need to get to. I think that absolutely needs to be an aspiration of where this technology begins to go. Because you're right, like the biomass that gets produced, the time and the length of time that it takes for that rice plant to grow, or the wheat plant to grow, or a barley plant to grow, like these are incredible. A lot of energy and time and space, and it goes into those components that are truly not completely wasted, because then we can use it in microbial fermentation processes. But that's not the ideal system. So I see that as an idyllic pathway, but I think a little bit far off from my current understanding. But I would love to be proven wrong.
We have a question from Carmen who asks, do you think cell ag can take a bigger turn towards production and consumption in space rather than here on Earth? Is there, maybe this question could be applied towards cell ag technology, or maybe even another type of technology that's more optimized and used in space than it is even back on Earth.
So let me rephrase that, or let me restate that just so I'm clear. So are you asking if do I see cellular agriculture taking off and getting more market acceptance in the space ecosystem before Earth? Is that the question?
I would say instead of market acceptance, more of just kind of use. Will more people consume, for example, cell ag or other future food technologies in space, not exclusive, but more so than Earth? Do you think that could be a possibility?
I hope not. I really hope not. We've got 11 people that are on the International Space Station right now. So let's hope that that's not the situation. I think that it's going to make a lot of sense to utilize the cellular ag in space first, because food is crazy expensive, just the logistics of sending it up there. And so the cost of a cellular agriculture burger or sashimi is a rounding error. So it really should be used there, and that's absolutely where we should be spending the serious money that it takes to commercialize the technology. Space should be the thing that's supporting this industry. But I really hope that and I'm very encouraged. Israel and Singapore, their regulatory approvals have really, it's incredibly encouraging, and I hope that the rest of the world wakes up and starts looking at this much more seriously, so that that's not the case.
I guess we could consider that we've already reached price parity if we're talking about food on the ISS, right?
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
So we have a couple more questions coming in, and one of them is from Brandon, who asks, what's the likelihood that something like Omega will actually be deployed for water or waste processing, food production, etc.?
Omega. Can you remind me what Omega is?
And I don't know what Omega is. So Brandon, maybe you can follow up on that. And while you do, we have another question we could tackle regarding water. And this person asks, so water is the biggest challenge, isn't it? How do you harvest water in space? Any current solutions for anything like that?
Yeah, so water is going to be the very first part of the space economy. This is what we're going to harvest on the moon, and what we're going to look for asteroids, and what is going to derive selection of locations where settlements are going to happen on Mars. We need water for all processes, but most importantly, we need water for fuel. So when you're trying to set up any sort of new economy, getting fuel to launch on and off the surface of the moon or Mars, operating different facilities and systems, you need a fuel and energy source. And solar is great, and nuclear power is great, but you need an energy storage mechanisms, and rockets need something to shoot out of the back end of the rocket to propel it forward. So water will be harvested from on the moon through lunar regolith. There's a number of different solutions, from basically microwaving the soil and catching the evaporated water to mining and looking into the deeply shaded craters that are on the moon. There's significant amounts of water, we believe, that are in water and ice form that are there. So that's really where it's going to get harvested and then stored and put into liquid form to then be used to hopefully put into our agriculture system. So that's there. We have to assume that water will be there. Otherwise, there's not going to be a settlement. We're not going to bring all the water that we need with us. So if there's no water and we're not able to do that, this is a bit of a moot point anyways. So.
Great. And we do have quite a few more questions, so we'll be transferring them over really quick. So Brandon did follow up. He said Omega is NASA's offshore membrane enclosure for growing algae, developed at Ames for processing wastewater, etc. And so we'll transfer that question along with the others into the Slack channel. And that's the questions for speakers Slack channel. And then you can answer any additional questions there. Scott, thank you so much.
Thanks very much for having me.